Krista, don't forget to let me know when to come down and talk to the kids.
I will. I'm going to send anyone that wants to. I'm going to make you you host, and Stephen, you co-host, I guess.
Yeah, do that.
See, right here is the edge.
Okay.
Um, okay, we are live.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to a few of you. Welcome to today's community briefing. My name is Gregory Sneed, and we are so glad that you are here. Our guest today is Miss Tracy Lawrence, and she's going to be sharing with us some very valuable information for businesses and for the community. My name is Gregory Sneed, and the name of my company is Lifesaver Financial Services, where I help my clients keep more of the money that they make. And I do that through life insurance products, financial coaching, and financial literacy training. Because I firmly believe that when you feel better about your money, you feel better about your life. So if you and your money would like to get back on speaking terms, give me a call, send a text, send an email, and I'll hook you guys back up together. One happy family. All right. So now, without further delay, it's my pleasure to bring to our virtual stage the queen of our community briefing, Miss Crystal Mitchell.
Good morning, everyone. Happy that you're here, Tracy. So happy to have you as our speaker today. I will obviously catch you on recording. I am excited today because my great niece, who is almost like my granddaughter, because I raised my niece, she was born this morning on July 7th. American time, but she was actually born in Egypt and this morning. And so I'm so excited. She's a beautiful baby girl. And then I have Biz Camp going on. So July is my month to dedicate my services to my children, to the kids of our community. So I'm going to pop off and go handle them. Next week, though, guys, you're going to have 40 kids here on the community briefing coming to hear Mr. David Ford and he's gonna so they're gonna you guys are gonna be wowed by these kids. They're absolutely amazing. So my name is Crystal Mitchell. I am the co-host of Recycling Black Dollars. What happened? Let's get this going.
You still have to be co-host, so you have to name yourself co-host, and then
Well, I just
restart
named you co-host. You're the host now.
I understand, but you're not anything, so that's why I mean, you're somebody, but you're not a host. You're not a host or a co-host as far as Zoom is concerned. So that's why it stopped the recording. So I think you
Okay.
have to name yourself co-host
Okay, but I
to
can't name
do the
myself
recording.
co-host.
Yeah. And
You have to
then,
name me co-host.
oh, all right.
Yeah. All right, we're getting this together, guys. We didn't just start this yesterday. We actually been on air for 3 years.
Make co-host.
Okay.
There we go. All
All
right.
righty.
Let's
Okay,
see if we
now
can
I
do
can
that.
record. All righty, there we go. So anyway, I am the co-host of Recycling Black Dollars, and this podcast, webcast, is sponsored by Recycling Black Dollars and the BBA, and as well as some great sponsors, Edison, Wells Fargo, and SoCal Gas. So we want to thank you for attending. This is a platform for us, not just us, me, Greg, and Stephen, and Robin. It is a platform for our community. It's the platform that you can come and hear and learn who our stakeholders and leaders are in our community. You can voice your opinions and make everybody accountable. But most importantly, we want to make sure that everyone gets information for our community, our Black community, firsthand when it's hot off the press. So we want to welcome you here for the for the event. We have a great speaker today. Our great team, Mr. Gregory Sneed, Mr. Stephen Turner, and Ms. Robin Billups, who is right now getting treatment at City of Hope. We are all here to service you. So welcome, and please go tell a friend. We want to grow this channel to be the main source of information in our community. So with that, I'm gonna turn it back over to Greg, and we're gonna have a great show today.
All right. All right. Thank you. So, Crystal, I am recording also. This way, hopefully, if you leave and it stops, I didn't see that it started to stream, so you just check that.
It's streaming.
It is? Oh, fantastic.
Mhm.
So normally Crystal is here and we don't have some of these admin hiccups because she is just usually just the host. So thank you for that. So Tracy Lawrence, I'm going to tell you about Tracy. All right. Tracy is currently a leadership consultant specializing in delivering dramatic improvements in organizations. So she helps them with strong, distinct cultures. And that includes asset management, entertainment, disruptive technology, sports, media, and other sectors, which she has unique qualities to help their corporate culture so they can have an impact on how their business is conducted. And her client work includes executive recruiting, executive coaching, competency management, and leadership development, team building, enhancing executive presence, and conflict resolution. She has been doing that for the past 13, almost 14 years now. So, congratulations on coming up on your 14th anniversary. She's also a board member at certain organizations, Hear Me, also with Nile Capital. And our previous guest, Melvin Lindsay, from about 4 or 5 months ago, was on. And so she's on with the board there at Nile Capital. Let's see, with the University of Southern California, Marshall School of Business. And let's see, she has past work experience with Russell Reynolds and Associates, Hype TV, ABC Family Channel, Fox, and it's the Fox Family Channel, not the Fox News. Just don't get it twisted, right? MTV Networks, Nestle, the chocolate people, Kraft Foods, and I was teasing Crystal. She went to two of these no-name schools that nobody's ever heard of, right? So she went to Stanford University, and she had her MBA from Harvard Business School. Yep.
Harvard.
So, Harvard, yes. So anyway, it's my pleasure to welcome to our virtual community briefing stage, Miss Tracy Lawrence.
Thank you, Greg, and thanks to everyone. And I'm really excited to be here and, just want to congratulate you all for putting this forum together. It sounds like you all have been doing some amazing work. So thank you for all that you do. Oh, Greg, I think you're muted. Yeah.
Our format is that you'll share with us for about 15-20 minutes or so what you do, how you help people, how you got into this field, all the wonderful things that you do. And then afterwards, we'll have a little Q&A. Folks will be able to enter some questions into the chat. I might have a few follow-up questions for you as well. So the stage is all yours.
Thank you. Thank you. So I always say when I'm talking about the work that I do, that I sit in kind of the intersection of two things that I'm very passionate about. The first one is really understanding what motivates people, right? So if you look at my career and my life, my adult life, it's really been about pursuit of that question. The other passion is really business. I have a passion about, I find the business world, particularly kind of growing businesses, early stage businesses, to be really fascinating. And I see running my own business as a passion project, but also a creative project, really, creating something out of nothing. And so I kind of sit in those two worlds. My background is, I think I discovered at an early age that I had this interest in, like, why do people do the things that they do? And my first thought in terms of career was I'd go into being a journalist. And so actually, when I was in high school, I looked at being a newscaster, and, because you look at the things that you know. And so that's what I knew. So I worked in journalism as a young person. And then as I learned more about business, I kind of started to evolve my thinking. Majored in economics in college. And while I was in college, started again learning about business and decided to go to business school. I was accepted to Harvard Business School, but they said, no, you need a little work experience first. So I was accepted in what's known as a deferred admit. So they said, you can come, but you got to work for a couple of years first and then come. And so in between those years of college and business school, I worked at Price Waterhouse and basically worked in their litigation consulting business, which I absolutely hated. So I always tell people, when you're starting early on your career, sometimes what you want to do is figure out what you don't want to do. So I sat in front of a computer for two years and did business modeling. So we did litigation consulting. We would look at what would have happened in the marketplace if this bad action hadn't happened. And you have to figure out what would a company's P&L look like. You have to reconstruct balance sheets, P&L. And it was great from the standpoint of really understanding how businesses work, but I really hated sitting in front of a computer and crunching numbers. So when I went to business school, I learned about the world of marketing and advertising and found that I had kind of a knack for it. It just came really naturally to me. So after grad school, I went and worked in marketing at Kraft and learned, when you're doing, so that's a field called brand management. And when you're doing that kind of work, it's great training because, you're like 25 years old and you're running a P&L that's like $100 million and you learn all aspects of running that business. And so I did that, but then I found that I was bored because these businesses are just so large. So I left the world of packaged goods and was kind of trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And this is in the 90s, right? So there was no internet. So I'd like go to the library and just sit and read. And I saw this ad in the back of a magazine that said MTV was looking for marketing people. And I was like, that sounds fun. So I applied, I got the job, and I spent a decade doing marketing in television and rose up the ranks at Viacom, became vice president of marketing at Nickelodeon. And I think, so that was a time when new television networks were spouting up every year. And I became kind of an expert at launching new networks. And I launched a bunch of new networks. I understood how to get distribution. I became known in the cable television industry. And towards the end, my boss left and went and became CEO called Fox Family Worldwide. And that was a joint venture between a very high profile billionaire, Haim Saban, who created, I don't know if you're familiar with the Power Rangers, I'm sure you are. So Haim was a, very powerful, very wealthy man because of some of the investments that he'd made and started this joint venture with Fox to buy a television network and turn it into the Fox Family Network. And I moved over and became general manager of that network and basically was one of the key people running the network. We ran that network for several years and then it was sold to Disney for $3.6 billion, which was at the time the highest price ever paid for a television network. That network is a part of Disney now. It's known as Freeform, if you are familiar with that brand. And so after doing that, what was fascinating about that experience for me is up until then I'd worked for corporations, but working for this self-made billionaire. I mean, Haim Saban has I think the highest education he got was 9th grade. And so he's Egyptian, he's an international, an immigrant. And I just was really intrigued and inspired from the standpoint of what does it really mean to have something of your own? And I noticed such a difference in working for someone like that, where every dollar you're spending is his dollar, right? Versus working for a corporation where, we launched television networks when I was at Viacom. And, if we got the numbers wrong, we're off by $10 million. Somebody just, transfers a line item to you, and then you got that $10 million and you're not, the level of accountability in a corporation is very, very different from when you're doing a joint venture that has a board and people have invested money into that company. And so I found myself just feeling fascinated by these questions, right? Like, how does who is actually running the business and what their perspective is? How does that impact the daily actions that you take? How does the structure of the organization affect what you do? And most importantly, I go back to this question of what motivates people to do the things that they do? So my old boss from Viacom, I would have said he was the best boss I'd ever had. And when he left and became CEO of this company, I would have said he was the worst boss I'd ever had, because he was working in a different environment. And now it was entrepreneurial, and he had never had that level of accountability. So again, all of these things just kind of, I guess, stimulated my curiosity. And there's a famous quote by a leadership expert that says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. And what it means is you can have a great business strategy, but if the people in your organization aren't operating in a way that is consistent with what your goals are, it doesn't matter what your written strategy is. And so that is really the area that I play in, is, how to develop a culture that gets people to do what you need them to do, and therefore deliver financial results. So after we sold the network, I was trying to figure out what to do. I was interviewing for jobs. And then this firm called Russell Reynolds Associates actually offered me a job to lead the entertainment practice out of Los Angeles. And what Russell Reynolds does is they do high-level executive recruiting. So we did things like, there's a venture capital company putting money into a business and we need a CEO of that business, or, a senior level head of marketing, head of, e-commerce, whatever it is. And so I learned to do executive search that way. And then they also had a practice called executive assessment, which is what I was very interested in, where we would look deeply at a senior level person, or sometimes a company would bring us in, like one company brought us in and we looked at all the top 100 executives at that company. And we would do like mapping. We would say, well, what are the skills that they have and what are the skills that they need and what's missing? We call it a gap analysis. So you can look at a team and say, because people tend to want to hire in their own image, right? And that's good, but not always. So when you hire in your own image, you may end up with, for a management team of 50 people, everyone's really good at this, but there is no one who's good at that. So I learned how to kind of do that type of assessment. And so I worked at Russell Reynolds for several years. When it got to be around 2009 and the economy crashed, and as one of the senior level people there said to me, we looked at our business and we were staring at a cliff, literally. And so they laid off half of the team, and I was in like the fourth round of layoffs at that team. And so I had about a year to really think deeply about what it is that I wanted to do. And I decided that what I wanted to do is kind of take some of the learning from Russell Reynolds, but do it more in my own way. And my way is really way more strategic. We do search, we do coaching, we do organizational consulting, and I have a lot of firms where I do all of those things. And so we take a more holistic approach to working with organizations. You mentioned Nile Capital. I do work with Mel at Nile Capital, and what's pretty cool about that is, I can work with his portfolio companies, and they're all small growing businesses. And so, when you're a company and maybe you have 20 employees, but you're growing and eventually you're going to have 100 employees, there are huge implications for how you treat, who do you bring in? You know, a lot of people that are right for right now, but not right for 10 years from now or 5 years from now. So I'm the person that kind of steps in and helps them think that through. I also have done a fair amount of diversity, equity, and inclusion work. So a lot of my clients are still in the entertainment industry. And I've done a fair amount of work with diverse employees. So I always say what can be very interesting is people who get an executive coach, which I do, I tend to work at pretty senior levels. People who get an executive coach that their company sponsors, a lot of times are white men, right? Because they're the ones in those big jobs. But if there is a person of color that needs a coach, a lot of times I'm the one that gets that work because there just aren't that many coaches of color that are out there that are operating at that level. And so I have kind of an interesting window on what I would call the journey of a diverse executive, whether it's at a corporation or at a more entrepreneurial venture. So I've done a lot of work advising companies and organizations on creating more inclusive environments. You know, I have a real passion for creating healthy work environments, and then also for helping individuals to kind of tap into a place of passion for them. So I'm really big on trying to create, I guess I would just say, inspiring work environments and helping people to find work that is not just good, you know, look, we all need to pay our bills, but that kind of brings some sense of satisfaction to us personally. Yeah.
Thank you. That's fabulous. So, you know, some of the challenges, obviously, in executive coaching, you mentioned certainly from a minority standpoint or a diversity standpoint. Also, share a little bit about, you know, women, because women are, you know,
Yes.
increasing into the executive board levels. You know, some may be of color, some are not, but they still have a lot of the challenges, you know, in sort of getting into that old boys network, especially with your large, you know, multinational corporations. So, share a little bit about it in terms of the challenges for women, you know, of all colors.
No, it's a great question. So particularly now with you've had a lot of the work from home movement. And one of the things that we find, like when we go out and do recruiting, the number one question we get is, can I work from home? Or is it a hybrid environment? I mean, a few years ago, I would have thought it was unheard of that somebody could say, well, I need to work from home 3 days a week. But nowadays it's the standard. And women in particularly are much more vocal about that issue. And you really find a kind of a disconnect. You find in organizations, it tends to be the white men that are asking people to return to work, right? Because that environment was built for them and they're very comfortable with it. But anyone that's in any kind of marginalized group, what you find is they love working from home. They love the flexibility because, first of all, you don't have microaggressions. The level of microaggressions is way down when you can work from home at times. You don't have the code switching that you have to do when you have to show up for an in-person work environment. So women are at the heart of that issue right now, and it's very interesting. The other thing the other dynamic that I see a lot is younger women. And when I say younger, maybe this tells my age, but I mean like under 40 or under 45, right? They're not having it. I've seen a lot of instances come up where a man will, exhibit behavior that he may feel is innocent. And maybe it is in terms of his intentions, but you say the wrong thing to a woman that's 27 and you've got a major issue, right? So I think younger women are looking at issues of sexual harassment. Am I comfortable in this culture? flexibility in terms of work scheduling. They're looking at things in a very different way these days. And so I think you're going to find, particularly you add on top of that, the issue of the, the Great Resignation, which I'm sure you've heard about. People are, after COVID, people are staying home. People have options. They don't necessarily feel the need to kill themselves for the job anymore. And so there's going to be a lot of pressure on work environments to adapt.
That was actually going to be one of the next questions, is how
Yeah.
things are evolving in terms of the Great Resignation. And I was looking at a video of I forget his title, but essentially it was sort of VP of DEI, and they were looking at modeling and predictive modeling in terms of, when people resign, at what point, how long are they there, and there was a 2 year marcation where under 2 years they tend to stay put, they're not really leaving, but past the 2 years they are. So what can we do in terms of maybe providing promotional opportunities, or maybe even not a promotion but lateral movement, doing the same thing but just in a different group or a different location? And how has that changed from, looking back at your MTV and Fox times, because that was in the 90s, and it was radically different
It's
than today's environment.
it's really different. I think so. It depends on what industry too. So like the entertainment industry, there are certain places in the entertainment industry that are still, there's this sense of I'm lucky to be here, right? I'm lucky to be at this company. And so you still have a little bit of that culture, which is why you have these high profile instances that have come out in the press of people being very, very abusive in the entertainment industry, particularly on the creative side. Because I mean, I've seen people at some of these high profile organizations give up way more personally than they should because they want to be there. And it's still very relationship driven. So some of that is still the case at certain kind of places with a lot of cachet, shall I say. But that being said, because we do a lot of recruiting, and I have never seen an environment like this where, we'll put candidates up for jobs and they just drop out. They just, I've never seen anything like that, where your typical recruiting process may take a couple months for a senior level job, maybe 3, and you get them and they're sitting on multiple offers, or you lose them because you can't compete with, financially what they're looking for. So it is a very tight market. And what's I think is going to be really interested is we're, headed for, we've got inflation, there may be an economic downturn, and how that's going to affect people's perspectives on this. So it's going to be interesting.
And share with us a little difference in terms of, the community being, of a diverse background. We used to call it, going, crashing through the glass ceiling.
Yeah.
Okay. And I heard a guy talk about this some months ago. He says, what you don't take into consideration is when you crash through the glass ceiling, the shards of glass that are cutting you or have cut you. So, and if it can be really sharp where you get into there, but then you bleed out quickly, or you might have been cut by the glass and now you're just bleeding out soul. Some of your soul or some of your personality is leaving, because now, you kind of have to go along to get along. So I'm hopeful that some of that is changing. Share a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so it's very interesting. I work with right now, I'm coaching 4 or 5 really, really, really senior Black executives, like really senior. And it's hard. Like one of them, we had this long conversation about how, it's lonely at the top, right? The higher you get, the fewer people there are who really understand what you're going through. And a classic example of the kind of topic I would find with a Black executive would be they get to kind of a certain level, I would say like VP level, which isn't, senior, it's not C-suite, but it's still senior. And they get to that level and they say, I'm the best person at my job. And yet other people are being promoted ahead of me. And people tell me that I'm doing a great job and I don't understand what's going on. And a lot of times what's going on is, for those of us, we go to school, we go to college, the rules in college are pretty straightforward and pretty much the same for everybody, right? You study hard, you're smart, you move ahead. But the rules in the working world are really different. And most of them are unwritten. And so a lot of times, to your point, Greg, that you get into a large company, or sometimes it's even more entrepreneurial, you don't understand. There are conversations happening that you're not privy to, and so you think you're playing Monopoly, but the game is three-dimensional chess, and you don't have a rule book. And there's and if you haven't gone out of your way to really understand what those rules are, it's easy to be stalled, right? So a lot of times what I work with senior level people on is really evaluating what is the environment that you're in and trying to break down how are things really going. When I became an executive recruiter at Russell Reynolds, which is like a large global firm, one of my biggest worries was that my Black friends were going to be calling me saying, hey, you can give me a job now.
Hook me
Right?
up.
Yeah, hook me up. You can give me a job. And I was really surprised to find that when I went there, it wasn't the Black people that were calling me. In fact, very few Black people, and I knew a lot of people, very few of them called me. It was white men that were calling me. And I had never been on that side of the desk before, but white men that I knew or that I didn't even know were way more proactive in reaching out to me. I mean, I had a guy call me and say, show up in the lobby and say, tell her I'm here. I'd like to talk to her. Or, I had a guy that was up for a job a few years ago, white man, who, this job was very specific, right? You had to speak like 3 specific programming languages. It was, you had to all these things. And I interviewed him and I said, well, you don't have any of those things, so you're not really right for this. And he said, well, I'm going to call you on a weekly basis and just check in and see, when you evolve your expectations, and then we can continue our conversation. Right? A Black person, I have never had a Black person say anything like that to me. And this guy kept calling me every week. And my point is not necessarily that there's anything wrong with what these white men are doing, but it's that we don't even know that they're doing that. I didn't know that they were doing that. And I've been in a lot of big rooms. But as a Black person, and women too, right? People of color in general, or any marginalized person, what we tend to do is we look at our resume. Oh my God, there are 5 qualifications. Do I have them all? Have I proven myself? And let me make sure that I've got this before I ask. But if you're a person of privilege, you got a couple of those things, you're going to go for it. And so what I try to work with people from marginalized groups on is having a little bit more of that privilege and asking, right? And you can't always control whether there's oppression, right? There is oppression and we are treated differently. But what I always ask people is, okay, let's say that door is open for you. How are you going to walk through it? And make sure that you're prepared and make sure that you have everything and that you have the self-confidence in order to bust through that door.
One of the next challenges that I'm reading about facing organizations is that historically, politics and religion often stayed out of the discussions, but now corporations are beginning to take a slant one way or the other based on their location. For example, California-based corporations, by their proximity to being in a blue state, may lean more, or their corporate culture leans more towards democratic or more liberal views, and then corporations that are based in red states, where the corporate culture now is leaning more towards right or even far right. So do you see that evolving? Do you see that remaining to change? Is that going to be increasing? And how is that going to impact where people, look to work?
I do think it's a complicated question. You look at what's happened to Disney with the whole don't say gay laws in Florida, where Disney is a creative organization and they have employees who are progressive, right, and pressuring the organization to take a stand, a progressive stand, but they have this huge footprint in Florida where these laws are originated, and so there's a lot of pressure on organizations. But I do see, I work in Los Angeles, so I work a lot with companies based in California and New York. And there is a dramatic difference between companies based in these blue states versus, I just was doing an interview with somebody that's at an organization based in Arkansas, and try to do initiate some DEI, some diversity work there. And she was saying
What's that?
Yeah, that people quit. Yeah, people left. No, I mean, not everyone left. I mean, they're still doing it, and she's done some amazing work there. But the point is, like, I've never seen an organization out here where people quit because of diversity work. But so I do think there's going to be increasing pressures on organizations, depending on where they are. It's going to be, yeah. And then there's the legislative environment, depending on where you are, the state may have something to say about it. And God forbid our national government. I see Henry Brandon is on there. Hi, Henry. I just say hi.
Yeah, we have some regulars that show up, and Henry's not one of them. So I said, okay, so he must be someone that or some.
Yeah, he's an old
I'm a
friend.
big Tracy Lawrence fan. So
Okay.
And I'm a big Henry Brandon fan. So
help us to understand those of us who are trying to maybe aspire to get into corporate America or a new role, what have you. There's certain strengths or personality traits that do well, some that not well,
yeah.
and they're like tests or evaluations like Myers-Briggs or Gallup's Strength Finders and DISC, and there's a bunch of those different things. Or any that you have an affinity for, or corporations still doing? I forget what they call that. The type of not psychometric. Is it psychometric testing?
Yeah. There's a ton of them. I've used Myers-Briggs. I've used Berkman. My favorite is Enneagram. That's the one I used a lot now. So Enneagram it's kind of,
I've never heard of that one. Yeah.
So Enneagram is new and old. It's been around for thousands of years, but it's kind of had a resurgence in the United States. And the reason that I like it is, so as you can imagine, I've taken all of them, right? Because this is what I do. And so I've taken all of them. And what I can tell you is that whoever you are, if you're taking them honestly, they'll all tell you the same thing about yourself, because you're going to show up in a particular way. But the reason that I like the Enneagram is it's easy to understand, and it can be a lot of fun. And it's like Myers-Briggs may have 30 or 40 different profiles. Enneagram has 9. And so basically there's types 1 through 9. And it can kind of tell you, so for example, my Enneagram profile is type 7, which is known as the epicure or the enthusiast. And the type 7 is a person who is, endlessly interested in new things, right? And so it looks at like, who are you? What is your underlying motivation behind showing up the way that you do? The downside to the type 7 is you're endlessly interested in new things because you're trying to avoid your shadow emotions inside, right? So you're trying to escape, pain, which we all have. And so you're constantly thinking of new stuff. And so the great thing about the Enneagram is that you can figure out how you're showing up. Every type has kind of what we call a habits, certain focus and habits, and then it will point you to the things that you need to be working on, right? Personal development. And it can also help you understand how to work with another person. So for example, if I'm a type 7, really common types for business are type 3 is probably the most common. That's known as the achiever. So that's going to be a type person who's not just interested in the success, but wants the recognition for being successful, right? That's a really common type in business. Another really common type in business is a type 8, which is known as the challenger. And the challenger is all about understanding the dynamics of power. So it doesn't mean that they have to control everything, but they're just very, very attuned to the dynamics of power. So a good example of a type 8 would be Martin Luther King. So a lot of times a type 8 is focused on power in service to those who do not have it. So they can be like big-hearted, caring people, but they're gonna like jump in and get things done, right? And so if I'm working with a type 8 who's a challenger, and I do work with a lot of 8s, I know they may have a need to, they're gonna focus on, well, you know, screw it, I'm gonna get this done, and they're gonna jump in, but they may not be aware of how their persona is received by others who may not be so focused on the dynamics of power. So if you have an 8 and a 3, what I would always tell the 8 is you got to think about whatever you do with that type 3, how does it make them look? Because they're going to be very focused on how things make them look. The 8 doesn't care how it makes them look. The 8 cares about getting it done, right? So, yeah.
And what's the name of that one again? That's the one you're referring to with the numbers?
Enneagram. Yeah, Enneagram.
I'm gonna put it in the chat. Bear with me. Look at spell it again.
Enneagram. So you can take the test at the Enneagram Institute. You just go on the website for the Enneagram Institute. The test costs like $12. And it'll spit it back out at you, and it gives you a lot. It gets very rich, right? So it can give you information on how you work with other types, which is a space that I work in a lot. You know, I think it's great for fodder for self-reflection. So I think it's a lot of fun.
I think I found the site. I'll put that in there. I wasn't aware of that one. I have to try that out. I know that on Myers-Briggs, I'm at ENTJ.
ENTJ, that makes
ENTJ,
sense.
yeah. And the Gallup, has a show of hands of anybody, or put in the chat. Have you guys done a personality test? You want to chime in? Anyone done Myers-Briggs or DISC or Enneagram? Anybody else ever heard of that? Crickets. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so what's I'm a fan of taking an assessment, because who you are affects what you do. And you know, being successful in anything isn't just about you know, learning how to do something. It's really about learning yourself, knowing yourself, and finding the right path for you. May look different the more self-knowledge that you have, right?
What percentage of your clients roughly will have taken something like that? I imagine it's fairly on the low side where they.
Well, yeah, if they're coaching with me, that's a part of what I do. So I always start out by giving it to them. But most people, by the time they get to me, probably have not taken one. Some people, if you work for a corporation, a lot of corporations will put people through them. But I don't know. Like I said, you know, self-awareness is a really, really important part of being a leader. It's, I would argue, the most important part. If you don't know who you are and how you're showing up, then how are you going to get better? You know, so for example, with me, I have a long career working at corporations, but I am not suited for working in corporations. And I always knew it. And I did well, but I was never satisfied. And so I think it's important, when I started my own business, a lot of people have asked me, well, how did you get the self-confidence to start your own business? And to me, it's just such an odd question, because for me, it was like, how did you have the self-confidence to stay at a large corporation for so long when you knew it wasn't right?
Yeah. I used to work for Coca-Cola, and so Coke was very big on the training. So I did some of the personality tests then. And then I got addicted to it. It's like, okay, different ones came out, and I actually thought about, there was a woman who was looking to sell these testing to companies, and she wanted me to come on as a salesperson to help,
Oh, interesting.
sell it. Yeah, the money wasn't right, and she seemed a bit odd. Our personalities were different in that regard. So, but I think it's helpful. And I was talking with, was it 2 years ago with one of our guests, Daryl Brown, and Daryl had mentioned to me about the Gallup, the strength.
Yeah, strength
I don't know if
finder.
it was always Gallup, but it's Gallup now. And I said I did it a long time ago, but I think I did just the top five. So this way I paid the extra coin to do all 38 or 37 of them. And it's very enlightening. I think when when you get an objective analysis of who you are and what your personality type is, that can help you, because now you're able to plug into, knowing what you're suited for and maybe what you're not suited for.
That's right.
If you like people like sometimes a very regimented environment, and they need that structure, and can't handle something that's very sort of loosey-goosey, like you were talking about, going from the corporate environment to the entrepreneurial environment, or having that accountability, whereas a big corporation, you get away with stuff. So I see in the chat here a few people said that they have.
I see
No,
Myers-Briggs a lot.
no,
Yeah.
but I will. Did Myers-Briggs, did it a long time ago. Somebody actually put in their rating. Rich said he's taking it, but he didn't share with his letters. He said, nah. But I think it's helpful. And I think on the hiring standpoint, it's interesting also with Coke. They forced us to take this course. It was a week-long course in interviewing called Targeted Selection. And it gave a quantitative process of hiring, where if you had a number of people, usually one person wasn't making the decision. So you would meet together as a group as to what you were looking for. And then you identify certain questions, and everybody asked that candidate the same questions. And
everyone would ask them.
Everybody would ask. And then usually the hiring manager would just talk to everybody individually. Well, the hiring manager in this case gets everybody together in a room, and they kind of compare notes as to what was your take on this when you asked them that, and then you come up with a score of 1 to 5 in these categories, and I think it was like 20. And so for every candidate, you actually give them a numerical score, and in theory, the one who has the highest score is the person you should hire, because they had the most attributes. So it was just, and this was a while ago. So there's a lot of tools out there to first understand who you are as a person, and that can also help to, if you're looking to find a place to work, am I going to fit in that environment?
Absolutely. And it makes all the difference, because I don't know, I'm sure many of you out there have been in a job where it wasn't a good fit. And it can really have a very debilitating impact on your emotions, your emotional state. It can cause depression. And I don't know if you've ever had this experience, but when you're in the wrong job and then you leave the job, all of a sudden the sky's a little bluer, the birds are chirping a little louder, like life is better, because it drags on you, because you're spending all day in this environment that doesn't reinforce who you are, right?
Well, so part of it is the wrong job, but I would say you may be in the right job, you got the wrong boss.
Yeah.
Because most people don't quit their job, they quit their boss.
That's true. That's a really good point. And the other thing is, and what I always encourage people to do before job hopping, is make sure you're showing up whole in that job.
Yeah.
And I'll use an example. When I was at Viacom, and I told you my boss left and went to Fox Family and then brought me over, right? So when he left, he had a non-compete, meaning he couldn't poach from his old company for a year. And he called me and
Only
he
1
said,
year? That's not bad.
for a year, he had a year.
Yeah, that's not bad.
And he said, look, I can't hire you for a year, but on July 9th, next year, I'm going to hire you. So I knew for a year that I had another job, right? So all of a sudden, I had this sense of freedom and I started taking more risks at work. And at where I was, I was a little frustrated because I didn't feel that I was being promoted as fast as I should have been. And I started speaking up and I went and talked to the CEO and I did all of these things that I would not have done if I didn't know that I had another job waiting for me. And all of a sudden, all these opportunities opened up to me internally. And it was a huge lesson learned that how much of it was the organization and how much of it was me, that I wasn't proactive enough, or I was afraid. I was so worried about keeping my job that I wasn't worried about pushing myself. And I ended up leaving, but when I left, it was a more rational decision because I understood what all my options were, right?
Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, that's the reason I left corporate is I was in the right job. Is that all of a sudden the division president I reported to left, and the new division president came in, and it was night and day. It was just radical, radical change, and that it lasted 2 months,
Mm.
and I knew it was going to be problematic. So, and then I went to the senior VP of human resources and I told him, I said, hey man, this is what I think is going on. Nah, you crazy. And I said, well, check it out and get back to me. And he came back the next day. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, it's, I remember when I was in college, I had to write this paper about corporations and behavior in corporations. It was really interesting because the thesis was that in corporations, so economic theory says everyone does what's in the best interest of the organization. We're motivated to make the most money that we can. We're going to do everything possible to do that. But the reality of business is that what is right for you personally may not always be right for making the most money. So there are people who are, running businesses who would rather stay in control of a small business than lose control and be wealthy in a bigger business, right? So there are questions like that, or there are people who in corporations, your motivation is just to keep your job. And so you may make irrational decisions for the corporations that way. So part of my role is to really get in and identify what's really going on, right?
Does anyone have a question that we haven't covered for Tracy they'd like to share at this time? Seeing none, hearing none. All right, Tracy, if you could just give us sort of a 1 or 2 minute summation of where sort of recommendations, and we talked part of it on the personality thing, but just kind of where you see things going and what advice you might offer to our guests and community.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, I'm a big fan of Enneagram. I put the link to that in the chat if anybody is interested. I think Enneagram Institute has the best assessment. And so I would encourage you, like I said, it's pretty cheap. You can go on there and learn something from there. And, look, I'm a big fan of, self-knowledge is key. Understand yourself, understand what you really need in your career, and being proactive and learning, adopting a little bit of that privilege, right? So don't just keep your head down and work, but really think about where you really want to go with your career.
And to the extent that you can, show of hands, how many of you have left the job because of the boss? Anybody?
Yeah. That will do it. That will do it.
Quick question, Tracy. When do you know if you need a coach? You talk about you do CEOs, but I know you do other people, and your advice is always treasured and valued. But how do I know if I need a coach or not? Because I'm not a CEO.
So I think the question is, first of all, everyone can use a coach, right? Everyone could use a coach, but the question is, are you ready to work with a coach? So if you are ready to work with a coach, the most effective coaching assignments are when the person shows up ready to self-examine and ready to ready to learn. Coaching is so the process of coaching, if you find a good coach, I say do it. It's completely confidential. It's that one person that you can talk to on a weekly or biweekly basis, where you kind of step out of what you're doing every day and you just talk about bigger picture. Where are you going? If you have individual issues, relationship issues with people you work with, what do I want to do with my career long term? How do I work on specific issues, that kind of thing. But you have to be willing to be honest with the coach. And I have worked with people who are not quite ready to do that. And then it's going to be, of limited value. But if you're really willing to bring an openness to the process, I say do it. I work with a coach. I have my own coach. And I talk to him every 2 weeks. And it gets really deep. I've been working with him for years. And my goal of coaching is to come up with a career that best reflects my values, who I am inside. So I say, if you're in a position to be able to afford a coach, or if your organization will pay for you to have a coach, 100% do it.
Tracy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Absolutely.
And, great information. And I think you put some contact information for those if they want to learn more about coaching or potential. And Stephen, who do we have next week? Stephen, come introduce yourself. And who do we have next Thursday?
First of all, I'd like to thank everyone for joining today to hear Tracy Lawrence. What a wealth of information. And on that same train of thought, next week we have David Ford from Southern California Edison. We'll talk about the electrical grid and the opportunities there are in the new electrical economy, the alternative vehicles, alternative energy sources. So tune in next Thursday, 11 o'clock for Dave Ford.
You might have some information that is shocking, huh?
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Stephen. Keep your day job, right, Greg? So, Tracy, it was wonderful. Great information. Thank you for joining us today. Everybody, thank you for joining us. If you joined in late, Crystal had a sort of a biz camp thing going on, so she had to leave us. She started off the show, but she left. She said she might come back, but at this stage, looks like she was still tied up. So we look forward to you joining us next week, and certainly encourage those of you to get information on yourself. I think those tests and discovering who you are is a great thing to do. I think during COVID, some of us found out who we are and who we're not, and if you realize, some of us enjoyed the time away from people, and some missed it dearly. They had to, to get out there and do stuff. So that's good telling. So thank you. We're right up on the 12 o'clock hour. Emma, did you have anything for us today? Anything?
No, but well, real quick, I will be leaving the SBA on September the 30th. So please call me if you have any special requests or need any particular training. And I am focused before I leave to help anybody that's trying to open their own business. So please, this is crucial for our community.
Cool. Can you hook a brother up with idle forgiveness before you leave?
Right. We wish.
Just gotta ask.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us today. We hope you come in next week. Stephen, thanks for your work. Robin Billups is still out dealing with some medical challenges and medical treatment. She'll be back with us soon. So, Robin, we miss you, and we pray for your continuing health and what have you. And thank you, Henry. I see the hand claps. Thank you very much. And tune in next week. Thank you for joining us today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Greg,
Bye.
Yes.
I'm looking at Cargill Consulting, the telephone number. There's one too many digits. Can you tell me what that is?
Gil Cargill is also a coach. And
What's the
he
phone
helps.
Phone
I don't
number.
have the number memorized. So you can, did he
Okay.
give a, usually, I think he usually gives a email. I mean, there's a phone number there, and there's usually a email. So he has a phone number. Oh, this phone number is too many digits.
Right. Okay. I'll look it up.
So his name is Gil Cargill.
Okay. All right.
You have the spelling of his name, and he is on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube. So there's a lot of ways. I just don't have that handy right here with me now.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye bye.